Test. Test. Test, test.
And you have one here. And you need this one as well?
No, it's just gonna be. This is too. I am so tall. That
Ladies and gentlemen, may we please ask you
Yes, I
to
think
go
that's
to your
good.
seat?
Maybe
Thank
we-
you very much.
Oh, no, not so much. Thank you. That's good. Your Excellencies, champions, colleagues, and friends, warmly welcome to the high-level section of SheDecides +5 meeting. My name is Karen Nilsson. I'm the lead for SheDecides support unit, and on behalf of SheDecides, I want to acknowledge the strong leadership and long-standing support from the government of Belgium. Belgium is not only one of the 4 founders and not one of the 4 founding governments of our movement, it's also our generous host for this meeting where we gather to celebrate 5 years of political action. Leading change takes courage and strong political and financial commitments. It's therefore my great pleasure to introduce to you Her Excellency Mariam Ketir, Minister of Development Cooperation and Major Cities Policy, Belgium.
Hello, everyone. I'm very happy and very pleased to be here, and I'm delighted to welcome you all for our 2 days together here in Belgium. In this room, we have champions, we have political leaders, experts, activists, and game changers across the world. We come together to celebrate what we have achieved as a strong and diverse global movement. A bold action to defend the fundamental rights of women, girls, and young people. In this room, we will be joining forces to ensure strong political leadership against all pushback to continue making a change. We want to see younger generations getting equal chances to grow autonomous and empower, whatever their gender, age, or sex. And as the Belgian Minister of Development Cooperation, I invite you to put high on the political agenda the right for all young people, all women and girls to make their own choices of their body, their life, or their future. Dear friends, I'm very honored to give the floor now to our Prime Minister Alexander De Croo, who positioned Belgium as a champion government on this topic, and I'm very honored to replace him now as Minister of Development Cooperation, because I know that he was the founder and he also was the first to support the rights of the woman across all the world. So, Prime Minister, the floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone, and honestly, first of all, what a feeling to be here and to be here back. 5 years ago, it's exactly 5 years ago, our journey started. And our journey started first related to something negative. It was the reinstation of the global gag rule. That was what fired us up, and it started something positive. It was because for something negative, but then SheDecides started. And I have to say, I'm extremely happy that the person who came up with the idea, the person who, I think on a Saturday, said, we should get this going. And she's a dear friend of mine, I'm sure she's a dear friend of many of you, is Lilianne Ploemen. I'm extremely happy to have you here, and please give her a very warm round of applause. And you came with that idea, and then Ulla from Denmark and Isabella from Sweden and myself, we joined, and we said, what a great idea this is, and let's see how we can make something positive out of this. And I see many other familiar faces that I've seen 5 years ago and over the past years. What we started is a global movement that does not accept that the rights of millions of women and girls are being trampled upon. This is what we started, a movement that wants something which is quite logical. That is that every human being, also women and girls, can make their own choices, and can make their own choices related to their own body and related to their own future. And since then, as I said, what a journey it has been. Today, this is celebrating a conference that took place 5 years ago. 5 years ago, we had 45 countries that were present here. We had many private donors who were present here. In total, we raised 181 million to help women and girls throughout the world to do something which is quite logical, which is family planning. And after those 181 million, and I remember during the day the number was just going up all the time, and sometimes we had the number going up and they said, well, you know, it's millions, but you can't really say from whom it is. It's not that it was drugs money or something like that, but it was basically some organizations from countries who said, you know, we want to do this as a private individual, but we don't actually want our governments to know what is happening. I mean, showing this was in the free world, it's still the free world, what kind of tension was being built around that topic. And since then, millions have continued to be raised, and what a great movement! What the amount of things that we achieved over the past 5 years. Still around the same promise, trying to save the lives of thousands and hundreds of thousands of girls, and giving them a perspective. Because you could look at it from a perspective of saving lives, but also in creating life. I mean, creating lives where women and girls make their own choices, make the choice of not having to get married at a very young age, make the choice of having a few children and not many children, having the possibility to go to school, to have a life where they're standing on their own legs, and maybe the most important of all, by these choices, making sure that their daughters are not being put in the vulnerable situation that they have been put. Since then, we've created also global champions. Global champions, 27 countries now from all continents, and I know quite a lot of you are here or following us through streaming. And maybe the most important thing, where it all started, is that there is another president now in the United States who chose to repeal the global gag rule. I mean, how happy are we that finally that has been repealed, but unfortunately nothing is ever achieved, and we know that it gets under pressure all the time. I think we can be proud and we should be celebrating what we achieved, and I understood we have a small reception afterwards, so we'll have the time to celebrate it in due time. But if I look back at where we are today compared to 5 years ago, I mean, there's a few things that should worry us, and that show that just like democracy, gender equality is something you need to exercise every day. And it's an effort from all of us every day, men and women, and we're never there. We always have to fight to maintain it. But three elements, I think, are worrying. First of all, we've seen the pandemic. And we have seen, as always, when things go wrong, who is bearing the brunt? I mean, who has been most impacted? And again, it was very often women, for a number of reasons. One of the reasons is that very often in the healthcare jobs at the start, there were no vaccines and so on. They were taking the most risk to try to save us, save our health. And we've also seen the impact of the lockdowns. We have seen that in cases of lockdown, domestic violence is going up, unfortunately, and that access to medical services is more difficult than it used to be before. So this is one of the lessons, I think, that in moments of tensions we have to be extremely attentive to things going in the wrong direction on that topic. Second element is we meet, unfortunately, at a moment of war in the European continent, and we not expected that something like that would happen. We are recovering from the pandemic, but 2,000 kilometers away from here, we have people fighting for, I mean, a free society, the ability to make their own choices, a country that wants to be part of a certain part of the world without being intimidated. Worse so, we see again that sexual violence is being used as a weapon of war, and the most atrocious stories, we see them. And honestly, it shows how attentive we have to be to this. I mean, even in war, there are rules. And especially violence towards civil population, especially gender-based violence. It's something we can never accept. We have done so much work in the United Nations and so many multilateral organizations on that topic. And that's why I want to be extremely clear. We should not forget about those women and girls, the stories of the horrific violence, of the traumatic experiences. Every detail, every element, we should document it, we should collect it, we should investigate it, and we should prosecute. I mean, people are responsible for those acts. We should prosecute them and make sure that nothing can go unpunished. There is no room for impunity. Never in the world, and definitely not in the war that we are living today in Ukraine. Third element is that we see throughout the world a broader movement of conservatism and of turning the clock back. And if you look at the last decades, I mean, the amazing progress that we have achieved. What have we achieved in eradicating extreme poverty? What have we achieved in making sure that young girls can go to school? What have we achieved in access to family planning? And obviously it seems to bother some people. And those forces are unfortunately getting stronger throughout the world. We see political forces that want to move women back away from the table, back into the kitchen. And then they call it family values. But we all know when people talk about family values what that exactly means, exactly meaning that women should not get the opportunities that they are getting today. And we also know the decision that has been taken by the US Supreme Court. And honestly, when I heard that, I couldn't believe that we would be in that situation. And the impact of that is not to be underestimated. There was an article in The Lancet last week, and I'm going to quote it. If the US Supreme Court confirms its draft decision, women will die. Justices will not succeed in ending abortion. They will only succeed in ending safe abortion. I think it tells it exactly the way it is. Because in the end, what this is about fundamental human rights. I mean, it's the fundamental right of every human being to plan the life they want to and not to be dependent on someone else. And so this is not just a discussion about women. This is a broad discussion about human rights, and it's a problem for all of us. I mean, for everyone who believes in democracy, this should be on top of our agenda, no matter what background we have, whatever which belief we have. Because there can never be relativism related to human rights. I mean, human rights are universal. There is no cultural discussion about this. It's not a nice to have. Even in difficult times like these ones, we should not be tempted to say, you know, there's other problems. Let's push human rights on the side for some time. I think it would be a huge mistake. Last element I would like to mention is that I'm happy to see men in the room. And as I said, it's not because I would feel uncomfortable with too many women in the room, but it's because if we want to achieve what we want to achieve, we need men on board. I mean, the biggest mistake we can make is to say that the discussion about gender equality is a topic about women and that only women can be a part of this. This is wrong. This is one of the reasons why very often some men are a bit defensive towards this topic. If we really want to achieve this, and if we want to achieve it for the right reason, and the right reason is also that in the world of today, we cannot afford ourselves to just be so wasteful with all the talent we have. I mean, we have so much talent throughout our different countries. If I look in Belgium, and we look at higher education, women are actually stronger in higher education than men. And then 10 years down the road, we watch and we say, what happened to all the women? Where have they gone? Why would we as a society have the goal to have the highest educated housewives in the world? I mean, what kind of a choice is that from a society perspective, and even not discussing from an individual perspective? We will never win this war if we don't have men on board. If we don't have men who say, I believe in this from a humanity perspective, but I also believe in this because I know that I have to play a role in this. I wrote a little book about this. It's called The Age of Women, Why Feminism Also Liberates Men. Let me say that it's not always easy to convince, because I remember that when I wrote this, people said, feminism? Are you writing about feminism? And why you as a man? But there are ways to convince everyone. And one of them is to walk the talk. And this is one of the things, and there's many reasons I'm proud of my government, but one of the things I'm proud of is that we are a parity government. There's many women, men as women, and this is a part of walking the talk. Does that mean that I do everything perfect? No. I know that even in all my political choices, sometimes there is a balance to be found, and we cannot always do the decisions that would be the ones which we write on paper. But really, to conclude, extremely happy to have you here. 5 years ago, we got things moving. Things continued moving the last 5 years, and if we continue to fight together in this, women and men, we will keep things moving. And I think in these times more than ever, it's important to keep things moving, because gender equal societies are better societies. And better societies, we desperately need that. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We are deeply grateful for your political leadership and strong engagement as one of our first champions. We are delighted to come back to Brussels to celebrate our joint results and to move forward together. Thank you also, Minister Katir. I would really like to acknowledge the leadership also of Minister Katir, and also to think that we are here together as all champions. I would also like to acknowledge, of course, the 4 founding governments who were part of the start 5 years ago: Sweden, Netherlands, and Denmark, and of course Belgium. So thank you so much, Minister Couture, for your strong support as well. We really appreciate it, and we're really happy to celebrate together as a movement here in Belgium. Thank you so much. I have now the great pleasure of opening up the floor for our distinguished representatives from other governments to deliver their remarks. And we have actually asked the governments to reflect on a couple of questions. What are some of the achievements that your government have brokered over the past 5 years? What are some of the success stories that we can celebrate as a movement? What are your ministry's priorities going forward? What issues will you champion going forward? And what are your political and financial commitments to SRHR, sexual and reproductive health and rights, and bodily autonomy, so that women, girls, and young people everywhere can decide what to do with their bodies, lives, and future? We are all excited to hear your thoughts, and we are deeply appreciative of your strong commitments and leadership within and together with SheDecides movement. In feminist fairness, I am honored to call upon these distinguished speakers in alphabetical order to share their views. I first call upon Honorable Minister Liesje Schrijnemacher, Minister for Foreign Trade and Development Cooperation, Netherlands, to deliver her remarks. Please join the stage.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, let me start by thanking Prime Minister De Croo and Minister Couture for organizing this timely and important event to celebrate the 5th anniversary of the SheDecides movement. I can't believe it's only been 5 years since SheDecides was launched. And that moment I remember vividly because my predecessor, Lilian Ploemen, who is here today, came immediately to action. And I'm really honored to follow in her footsteps. And it was a powerful response to the reinstatements of the Mexico City policy. And thanks to the SheDecides movement, its champions, its friends, hundreds of millions of euros have been successfully mobilized. And this has helped NGOs to continue fighting for women's rights worldwide, ensuring access to safe abortion and other essential sexual and reproductive health services. And thankfully, the Mexico City policy has been abandoned again under the current US administration. But we'll have to see how that plays out, of course, as Minister De Croo, Prime Minister De Croo also mentioned. And I think it's heartening that right from the very start of the movement, the Belgian government responded to the call for action, together with other like-minded countries, organizations, and individuals. Many have joined since then, from all over the world, and made important contributions. No questions asked. SheDecides is truly a testament to the power of solidarity. But we're not there yet. Just like 5 years ago, SheDecides is still very much needed. The pushback on the achieved rights of women and girls and their bodily autonomy is real, growing every day in every country. Pushback on commitments we collectively agreed upon. Pushback on policies and laws, and pushbacks on the rights of women and girls who already face the violence, exclusion and discrimination. And the truth is that in this field a standstill simply means backsliding. And on top of this, COVID-19 has also reversed some of the hard-won progress we've made in recent decades. School closures and economic hardship forced more girls into marriage. During the lockdowns, gender-based violence increased dramatically. And that is just the tip of the iceberg. We're losing sight of the global goals for 2030. Gender equality and sexual and reproductive health and rights are key conditions for sustainable development. So yes, we need SheDecides more than ever. The Netherlands is fully committed to taking action. And we already invest around 500 million euros a year in improving access to sexual reproductive health and rights, in strengthening health systems, and in advocating the bodily autonomy of all women and girls. We do not only do this because we believe every girl and every woman should have control over her own body. We also do this because we're convinced that investing in women and girls is one of the smartest things any country can do. And for those that still need convincing, it simply makes sense. Investing in women and girls means tapping into a huge amount of potential. It means investing in millions of potential doctors, entrepreneurs, politicians, and scientists. And crucially, it means developing the leaders we need to tackle the global crises of the 21st century. In our efforts, we put particularly emphasis on meaningful youth participation. And I'm very pleased to be joined here today by our youth ambassador for SRHR, Gender Equality and Bodily Autonomy, Laura Bas. Yes. Where is she? Her mission to give young people a voice in Dutch foreign and development policy is great. And I'm also pleased to announce that I'll be assuming the role of SheDecides champion as well. And it's, yeah. And I must say it's quite humbling to find myself among this diverse group of change makers who have already done so much to empower women and girls. And it's up to all of us to stand up and speak out. And I will do this by calling attention to the rights and health and safety of women in my meetings with decision makers around the world. And by organizing a dialogue on comprehensive sexuality education with governments, civil society and young people in Africa, which fits perfectly in our recently announced foreign feminist policy. Which I know some of us here have been eagerly waiting to hear that announcement of the feminist foreign policy. And united in the SheDecides movement, we need to accelerate our efforts for the health and well-being of women and girls. This is no time to sit back. Only by working together, speaking out and acting on our promises, we will get to a future where she decides. Let's make this future happen. Thank you.
Dank u wel, Minister, and thank you, Netherlands. I would now like to warmly welcome to the stage Honorable Minister Lindiwe Zulu, Minister of Social Development in South Africa. Please join us on the stage.
Thank you very much for the opportunity today. I'm a little bit intimidated for some reason. I don't know why.
Oh.
maybe the Prime Minister is intimidating me. Thank you very much, Honorable Prime Minister, and all protocol observed. That's what we normally say in South Africa, ministers and everybody, so that we don't leave anybody out. Firstly, let me just appreciate the invitation to be here today gracefully, and also take this opportunity to commit myself to the work that has been done for the past 5 years by SheDecides, the entire SheDecides team. And I would like to indicate that in South Africa, we're very excited about it. Since I arrived here, the media has been asking us questions, and I've been doing interviews, which is very rare, by the way. So it means that if they've been asking us what we are doing here and they never asked any negative question, goes to show that we have partners in this commitment. Having them as the media as partners in terms of ensuring that we send the right communication and the right messaging is very important for me, because I'm a Minister of Social Development, and therefore issues that are related to the well-being of our citizens across the board is very important. We talk about our citizens across the board because many a times social development is understood in the South African context to be a department that only has to do with people who are poor, people who are are vulnerable. Yes, that is the main focus. However, social development is about each and every citizen, because sometimes you find that even the citizens who are living comfortably in glass houses, when you get into that house, you find that what is happening there is very difficult, particularly when it comes to issues of women and particularly issues of abuse against women and children. This is a problem that cuts across all citizens, and therefore this opportunity for us to participate here. I was having the conversation earlier and I was saying that we need to have this conversation not for ourselves, not to ourselves, but for the people who struggle and suffer from abuse, and those in particular that cannot make the decisions for themselves, and that is in the majority, it is women. I truly believe that when she decides, she does not decide for herself. In many instances and in most instances, when she decides for her family, she decides for a community, she decides even for the man that she has at that moment in her life. She decides because she's always embracing, she's always wanting a better world. She's never wanting wars, by the way. She's never wanting wars, she's never wanting conflict. She hates conflicts with all that it comes with. And therefore, as a Minister of Social Development, not only am I committing myself as a minister to make sure that the work that needs to be done is carried out, but also to say my government, I know that my government has been committed to women empowerment, women emancipation, not only from the perspective of South Africa. We have been doing the work we've done with the region, across SADC, across the African continent, but we also dare take upon the world to say, it is time. It is time for women to walk proudly anywhere they are. It is time for women to be appointed in key decision-making structures. It is time for women to walk anywhere they want to walk, dress anywhere they want to dress, without being asked the question why they are dressed like that. It is the time, and particularly myself as a minister responsible for population matters in our country, South Africa, and the She Decides champion, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart. I really sincerely thank you for selecting me, because I will give it my best. I always give it my best. I have the honor. And let me also indicate that this comes at a very opportune time for me, because I am a member of the high-level commission on the Nairobi Summit, ICPD plus 25, since its inauguration in 2021. And therefore, the high-level commission has produced its first report that is titled No Exceptions, No Excuses, Realizing Sexual and Reproductive Health Rights and Justice for All. And this report introduced the concept of sexual and reproductive justice that aims to reconcile sexual and reproductive health and rights with social, political, economic for everybody. I joined the political advocacy strategy working group at the high-level commission as part of my country's commitment to accelerate the commission's efforts and amplifying messages in this report, and I'm hoping that She Decides will also take the opportunity to look at that, because my experience both in the political, in the social and everywhere has been that if we don't work in a united way, we will never be able to defeat this problem that we have in front of us. And I'm happy also, and thank you, Prime Minister, for raising the issue of partnering with men. In South Africa, for a very long time, we were running around as women trying to find out what is the problem, how can we deal with it, but we were leaving the men behind. Worst of all, we're leaving the boys behind, until the young men and boys stood up and said, please, let us work together. Let us join you in fighting this. But for me, this will not be defeated if there is no political will. And I can assure you that in South Africa, we have the political will. But political will without action on its own is a problem, because we continue to see women in particular struggling As part of my obligations as a She Decides champion and my country's commitment to accelerating the Commission's effort and intensifying the messages and recommendation of the high-level Commission report, in the coming year, my department aims to collaborate with partners, other government departments and civil society organizations to host a sexual and reproductive justice conference. This conference will take stock of all matters that relate to sexual and reproductive health and rights in my country and further chart a future direction for South African women, particularly young girls. And I think that seeing the challenges that we have and the fact that young girls, a shame in my country, there are men who make 10-year-olds and 11-year-olds pregnant. And I keep saying, there's no 10-year-old that makes a 10-year-old pregnant. There is a 10-year-old who is a girl, a child, a 10-year-old who knows nothing, who's not exposed to anything, and that child finds herself in a situation of being pregnant. It means there is an adult somewhere who is not doing the right thing. And among those adults, it is also about families that are not standing up and raising the issue. Families who think their child will give birth and they keep quiet and they hide it. That's where the problem lies. And therefore, my view is that the department, working together with other departments, we have to deal with this house to house, street to street, community to community. Only then can we be able to deal with it. As part of the Safeguard Young People, for instance, program that we had, and with the support of the United Nations Population Fund, we are developing a monitoring and evaluation framework on adolescent sexual and reproductive health and rights that will be accessible to all those implementing programs, including government, civil society, and private sector. This monitoring and evaluation system will enable us to improve coordination of information on SRHR and to accurately report progress on an ongoing basis. We will continue to work with youth, NGOs and networks to amplify sexual health and reproductive rights messaging and creating awareness about sexual health and reproductive rights. We are part of the Generation Equality Forum, which represents a strategic opportunity to change the discourse as well as the course of action to build back better and boost the implementation of the 2030 agenda. The forum can be used as a vehicle for further advancing the political support and reach on sexual health and reproductive rights. I will leave this document, which is my presentation that is supposed to be here, because I'm thinking that time is against us and we still have an opportunity. I will still come back, but I know that Prime Ministers always have little time, so I'm not going to keep you waiting for too long. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Minister Zulu. It's a pleasure to welcome you on board. Thank you so much, Minister Zulu. I now have the pleasure to invite the first feminist government in the world, Sweden. I have the pleasure to introduce Honorable Mr. Matilda Ernkrans, Minister for International Development Cooperation, Sweden, to deliver her remarks, and thank you for your constant support.
Excellencies, dear fellow champions, dear participants, I am pleased to speak to you today as Sweden's new She Decides champion. I'm so proud to be a champion. I'm so proud to be a champion together with you. And I know that my grandmother, she would be so proud of me today. She was actually a single mom in Sweden in the 1940s. It was very hard. And she was a single mom due to lack of access to modern contraceptives. She would have been proud of me, of us, that we are taking her struggle and her right as every girl and woman's right to decide over their own body. I'm pleased to speak to you, doing so representing the government, a government deeply committed to sexual and reproductive health and rights for all, and one of the founders of SheDecides. We believe in the transformative power of SheDecides, which is why we continue to be engaged in the movement 5 years after its launch. We all know that SheDecides started at a time of considerable pushback against the SRHR agenda. A lot has happened since then, successes as well as enormous challenges. The COVID-19 pandemic and its negative impact on tens and thousands of women and girls has made this all too clear. And yesterday's progress cannot be taken for granted. Past weeks have reminded us in very clear terms of that. So we must continue to defend the right to decide over one's body, health and sexuality. Thank you, Belgium, and thank you, Prime Minister Krogh, for inviting us to discuss how to best do this. As like-minded countries, organizations and movements, we must continue to work together against the ongoing pushback against SRHR and democracy and women and girls' human rights. As a feminist and as a member of a government with a feminist foreign policy, I will continue to do my part. SheDecides has been and continues to be an invaluable partner. I take pride in noting that our joint efforts have lent results. The like-minded group has expanded, and together we've stood up for sexual and reproductive health and rights, for example, at this year's Commission on the Status of Women. Last year, Sweden, together with many partners represented here today, facilitated the third Global Safe Abortion Dialogue. It brought together 650 participants from over 50 countries, a strong indication of the global commitment to a woman's right to have access to safe abortion. During Generation Equality Forum, Sweden made a commitment on equitable access to comprehensive sexual and reproductive health and rights. We also joined a joint commitment toward comprehensive abortion care, to which SheDecides and partners have signed on, and we welcome more champions to sign on. Political commitments must be backed up by substantial, flexible funding. Over decades, Sweden has been one of the largest financial contributions to SRHR advocacy and services. And we recently renewed our multi-year agreement for flexible core resources to UNFPA. And let me in this context stress that Sweden remains committed to the 1% of GNI for development assistance. And I would encourage other donors to join us at least to meet the 0.7% target, because investments in comprehensive SRHR save lives. And due to our commitment of 1% of GNI to ODA, during 2021, in our total ODA, we gave 7% to SRHR, and over 60% to SRHR in our health development cooperation. So yes, investment in comprehensive SRHR saves lives. Looking ahead, we see our engagement in the SheDecides movement as an important part of a joint and cross-regional action for SRHR, and we believe that our role as champions can be catalytic and inspiring. We should continue to join forces, broaden our champion space, and make sure that we make our success stories heard. Investing in SRHR is only not the right thing to do, but it's also smart. So let me be clear, from the Swedish government, I can assure you that our strong financial support for sexual reproductive health and rights will continue. I am proud to announce today that Sweden will contribute financially to the SheDecides important work for the coming year. Our contribution of 1 million Swedish kronor will support the implementation of SheDecides' next strategy. Yeah, thank you. In 2022, there is a possibility for this movement to focus on common action, outreach and messaging in several milestone occasions and meetings. The high-level political forum, with its focus on SDG 4 education and SDG 5 gender equality in July, and the UN General Assembly in September are opportunities to be taken and made the most out of. We look forward to strategizing together with you to ensure that SRHR is integrated in climate and environment intervention, in building resilient health system, and in the 2023 resolution on universal health coverage. And we would welcome further joint efforts among champions in promoting the normative agenda for SRHR in multilateral fora. There is one reason why we all are here. There is insufficient progress on the implementation of the agreed-upon comprehensive SRHR agenda. As SheDecides champions, it is our responsibility to stand up, to speak out for every person's right to decide freely over their own body and their own sexual and reproductive health and rights. And I am proud to be Sweden's champion, and I'm happy to take on this task together with you. Thank you.
Tack, biståndsministern. Thank you, Sweden. We're looking forward to working with you, and we are also really happy to have all these great champions on board to help advance the agenda towards next year as well. Thank you. I am delighted to invite back on the stage Honourable Minister Marianne Ketir, Minister of Development Cooperation and Major Cities Policies, to make her remarks. Merci, Minister. Thank you.
Thank you very much. At the beginning of March, I visited the Ukraine-Polish border, where I was able to visit the human toll to crisis in taking. I was very touched by the numbers of mothers and children that had to flee their country and leave everything behind. These women and children, forced to flee, face a high risk of gender-based violence and human trafficking. And I'm particularly worried by the staggering numbers of reports of alleged sexual violence. When it comes to sexual and reproductive health and rights, it is too often a forgotten topic when a crisis occurs. This was the case during COVID-19 pandemic. This is the case of Ukraine, but this is also the case of Tigray and many other places in the world. During my visit in DRC in 2021, I have had the opportunity to speak extensively with young women survivors of gender-based violence. And I witnessed the work of activists, local organizations and development actors active on this theme. And I was impressed. I was impressed by the strength of Congolese women and their willingness to move forward despite all the challenges. We decided to extend our support to survivors of gender-based violence in DRC so that we can reach and empower even more people. Special attention is also given to the role of men and boys. They must become our allies and role models in the fight for gender equality and against gender stereotype. Dear friends, sexual and reproductive health and rights are included as priority in the Belgian development cooperation for more than 20 years. Together with our partners, we positioned sexual and reproductive health and rights as a priority topic of international solidarity. Here in Belgium, we are lucky to live in a country where access to contraceptive is free for people until 25 years old, where safe abortion services are available. But unfortunately, this is not a reality in a number of other countries. Having access to contraception influences the course of life of women and girls, their level of education, access to employment, and contributes to the fight against poverty. And this is why we renewed Belgium's contribution to the flagship program UNFPA supplies with €4 million for the period 2021-2022. And since I have the honor to be the Minister of Development Cooperation and Great City Policy, we granted €124 million of core contribution to the general budget of UNFPA, UNICEF, UNAIDS and UN Women for the period 2021-2024. These are our main UN partners involved in girls' and women's rights and sexual and reproductive health and rights. Flexible and predictable funding and multilateralism is key to drive change and contribute to the Agenda 2030. Specific and mainstream initiatives for sexual and reproductive health and rights are implemented by Enable and our partners in Morocco, Burkina Faso, Benin, Guinea, Senegal. And more recently also in Palestine, DRC and Niger, as a result of bilateral agreements in each country. So far, this represents financial commitments of more than €80 million until end of 2024. And this has ensured that young people, men and women, they could have access to information and sexual and reproductive health and rights. And if I take the example of Rwanda, in 2021, more than 200,000 young people have been reached through interpersonal communication and door-to-door sessions about their rights and existing services. In the last couple of years, 8 youth-friendly centers have been constructed. This allowed in 2021 2,172 adolescents to access to information in these youth-friendly centers and health centers for adolescents' sexual and reproductive health. Unfortunately, COVID-19 pandemic has impacted on progress and positive results achieved by all partners and countries. Recent pushbacks in different countries continue to be a threat for sexual and reproductive rights for millions of people. But we should not give up. On the contrary, this is exactly why we should intensify our efforts. So to conclude, I would like to mention Belgium's contribution to the budget of the SheDecides support unit that was renewed until 2023. We need more activists to gather voices coming from champions across regions, organizations, governments, role and ages to defend these rights. The SheDecides support unit can and will also amplify these voices. And I would strongly encourage and welcome other government donors to join Belgium in this effort and support their work. Thank you very much.